There's an awful lot of quite confused Americans in the world.
In IPA, what is the difference between and I am trying to decipher the difference between these sounds, but they seem identical to me. Is it because of my dialect, American English, or is there a very subtle difference that I should look out for?
On to the difference between as in strut and as in comma.
Most Americans take this turned V and they move it very much towards the schwa sound.
Vowel schwa sounds like
The sound is represented by two symbols.
There are two symbols for this sound.
Most Americans don't really notice much of a distinction.
They're exactly the same in my accent.
Estos dos fonemas se pronuncian con el mismo sonido.
13 upvotes. In English, the only real difference between these two is that occurs in stressed syllables, and occurs in unstressed syllables. There is a slight acoustic difference between the two. Is supposed to be a tiny bit lower and possibly backer than but it is so slight that it is virtually indistinguishable.
It's just the true real schwa, as I call it, is never supposed to be stressed.
And it never occurs in a stressed syllable.
The in butter vowel is almost always stressed, so it is said longer and louder, and at a higher pitch.
Esta es la diferencia.
Both are essentially the same sound, made the same way with the mouth.
It may feel like it happens like in the same place in the same way.
So I tend to say as in strut with the advanced diacritic.
I like to put a plus sign under it.
Is actually just the fully enunciated version of what we call the schwa sound in American English.
And at a higher pitch.
The point usually comes up, of the difference between and For practical purposes, however, we will only use the first, the intent of the program being to get students to sound American rather than phonetically perfect, which, of course, Americans are not.
Although technically they are not the exact same sound, they are actually the same sound. And I know that sounds weird.
Now, I totally empathise with the confusion here, because I went through it all myself as an undergraduate student. You see, like most Americans, I have a native accent with one phoneme that occurs in both syllables of words like above, Russia, luscious, fungus and double. I'm from Merseyside, the Liverpool area. Now, English Northerners are famous for pronouncing strut words like run, cup and love with the same vowel as foot, run, cup, love. But like many other speakers in the north of England, my native accent pronounces such words with schwa. As I'll cover in my next video, so do a range of accents. Now, there's no doubt about my only having one vowel here. When I was 13, I invented my own phonemic alphabet, without the help of any books, just using my intuitions. And though there may be slight differences due to stress, it would never have occurred to me to use different symbols for the two vowels in double, or these two vowels in young Winston. And incidentally, that g wasn't a mistake. So a few years later, when I arrived at University College London and was handed this very sheet of paper listing the phonemes of RP, one of the things that at first surprised and confused me was the idea of a distinction between something written with a turned V and something written with a turned E. Of course, I quickly learned that the guys in charge had sprouted a surplus vowel. So I needed to work out when to use these two different symbols to transcribe RP. But our confused Americans are not transcribing RP. So why do they need to write two phonemes when, like me, they've only got one?
I'm also trying to do this based off of what you'll see in pronouncing dictionaries. Pronouncing dictionaries. Pronouncing dictionaries.
Ah, he surely means these two, the Longman and the Cambridge. Although they're both British, these dictionaries include transcriptions for both RP or BBC English and for General American. Now, RP-type speakers confidently feel a contrast between a strut phoneme and a comma phoneme.
The 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1
In English, it's a somewhat unorthodox contrast because of the shortage of minimal pairs, but that's for another video. The point here is that both dictionaries show General American as being totally identical to RP in this respect. So let's go through all the reasons these two dictionaries give for why they do this. There aren't any, and not that I've found. At least the Longman Dictionary admits what it's doing. LPD distinguishes between the vowels and although in American English they can generally be regarded as allophones of the same phoneme. These dictionaries are both by major authorities, so there's obviously some factor here that they're not talking about. And I'll get on to what that is in just a moment. But first, let's make it absolutely clear that important though these two books definitely are, there are plenty of other resources that do show the single American schwa phoneme for what it is. America's best-selling dictionary, for instance, the Merriam-Webster Collegiate. You can use it online at merriam-webster.com. It doesn't use turned V at all. Nor does lexico.com. Nor does Google Translate. If you want a big modern specialist pronouncing dictionary with both British and American transcriptions, there's the Oxford Dictionary of Pronunciation, which has now been taken on by Routledge. We can all email Taylor and Francis requesting a reasonably priced paperback. If you want new textbooks, we have American English Phonetics and Pronunciation Practice by Carley and Mace, which has all the supporting audio materials you need and no turned V. And there's also their American English Phonetic Transcription. Even the dictionary I co-edit, Cube, though we're not quite ready to release our American version, has an option to display just one phoneme rather than two. So, back to the question. Why is it that some resources feel the need to phonemically misrepresent General American? Well, of course, the key factor is one we heard about at the start of the video.
It is always unstressed. The schwa is always unstressed. This vowel is always unstressed.
Because it is always unstressed.
It never occurs in a stressed syllable.
And as I said, I've been through all this myself as a student. If you're trying to transcribe RP and you've only got one phoneme, you have to remember the rule. You can write it with a schwa symbol when it's unstressed, but you have to write a turned V when it's stressed. And this is the exquisite irony. It's those of us who do stress schwa who cling most pathetically to the rule that it isn't stressed. Because how else do we remember how to transcribe RP? Of course, sooner or later this strategy is bound to go wrong.
Undone. And in that example, you see that the first syllable was the schwa and the second one was the turned V. Undone.
Now, if you belong to the minority of native speakers who actually have a contrast between a strong strut phoneme and a weak comma phoneme, you'll know that the word undone has your strut phoneme in both syllables. This gentleman doesn't have the contrast, he has his schwa phoneme in both syllables. But he can feel a difference in stress levels, and he's been led to believe that stress differences require him to write different symbols. In other words, he makes this mistake precisely because he stresses schwa every day of his life. It's the insistence by various resources on two symbols for American English that causes the whole confusion we saw at the start of the video. Note, by the way, that when Americans show pronunciation by means of respelling, as they very often do, they just use UH for stressed and unstressed schwa.
The UH sound, up. In the middle of the word, done. At the end of a word, the.
Here's the old NBC Handbook of Pronunciation. In respelling, it puts UH in stressed and unstressed syllables. It's only in IPA that it has to pretend there's two phonemes. So this crazy rule isn't even about speech. It's just a mad typographical commandment about where you can print a particular visual squiggle. And so a genuine limitation on where schwa occurs in a few accents of English fossilised into a tyrannical false dogma. It's a dogma that Americans will apparently pay good dollars for. And academic linguists face a dilemma: how to deal with all the facts that contradict the dogma. This book articulates the dilemma beautifully. The authors describe a range of English accents which, like mine, have stressed schwa, and then think about how they can reconcile the evidence with all those t-shirts, clocks and tote bags. Given that one of the conventional defining properties of in English is that it occurs only in unstressed syllables, it might be best to view in stressed syllables as a realization of that is neutralized with respect to unstressed schwa. Or to paraphrase, if I've got this right, given that one of the conventional defining properties of the emperor is that he's nude only in private, it might be best to view the emperor in public as wearing a suit of lovely clothes that is neutralized with respect to total nudity.
Oh, lovely!
Lovely outfit.
Absolutely lovely.
As the authors say, it might be best to do that, and then again it might not. Let's be clear, there's absolutely nothing on the IPA chart that says any of these vowels are never stressed. The very idea is ridiculous, as is the idea that we should have two sets of vowel symbols, one for stressed syllables and one for unstressed syllables. And so is the idea that dictionaries should show allophones of phonemes. Dictionaries use the same symbol for both L's in illegal and the same symbol for 3 T's in treatment. Now, across languages, we sometimes find phonological systems that have some kind of typically central vowel that's the result of processes of reduction or epenthesis, or is in some way restricted to weak prosodic positions. We can find this kind of restricted vowel in French, German, and some accents of English, including... Now, I can understand that phonologists want a label for this phenomenon, but I don't see how they can have exclusive rights to the name schwa, because all over the planet that word is indelibly associated with this symbol, which means a mid-central unrounded vowel that's just as stressable as any other vowel on the IPA chart, and which is stressed by a wider range of English speakers around the world than those who can't stress it. More on that in my next video. So, Americans, if you're a dialect specialist, great! Obviously you're going to want to learn all the symbols and exactly what they all sound like. But for most people, phonemes are more than enough. Now, if you're one of the North Americans who does have a clear phonemic contrast between strut and comma, let us know in the comments. But most Americans stress their schwa phoneme, and that's fine too. Stop believing the merch. Britannia still rules the pronouncing dictionaries, but I say no transcription without representation. You don't need turned V to be phonetically perfect. Chuck it in Boston Harbour. This is the 21st century, I promise you. The Empire will not strike back.
I will kill your friends and family to remind you of my love. Love is all you need. 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 Love is all you need.